Welcome to episode number 237, where I'm speaking with Ayurvedic educator Mary Thompson about the 8 factors affecting food utility and digestibility. These are basically the factors you need to think about when choosing food and when cooking in your day-to-day life to make sure that you're providing your body and mind with the best resources possible. So please stay tuned. Welcome to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast. I'm your host, Colette, and I hope to educate and empower you to take charge of your health and well-being, preventing disease in the body and mind so that you can thrive in life. I will be sharing the holistic teachings of Ayurveda, which is the ancient healing tradition from India. Now, if you're new to Ayurveda, I recommend listening to the first couple of episodes where I do an introduction to Ayurveda and the mind-body types. And if you like the content, please be sure to subscribe or follow the podcast so the new episodes will automatically download for you. Also, you may want to check out my private Elements community, which is away from social media. It's a safe space for like-minded people to come together, to connect, to share, to support each other, and to continue the conversation from the podcast episodes. Check out the link in the show notes or visit my website, elementshealingandwellbeing.com, and just click on the community tab. And I hope to connect with you there. Thanks for listening. And now here's a new episode. Hello, and welcome back to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast. Today, I'm very happy to welcome back Mary Thompson, who is an experienced educator and a heart-centered mentor to Ayurvedic practitioners. Having taught Ayurveda for over 20 years, she continues to find joy in supporting her students as they step into their professional lives as Ayurvedic health counselors and Ayurvedic practitioners. Through individual mentorship and online continuing education, she maintains a supportive relationship with both new and experienced practitioners. Mary, it's always a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Welcome back.
Oh, thank you, Colette. It's wonderful to be back with you.
Thank you for joining us today, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. So we're going to talk about the 8 factors affecting food utility and digestibility.
Yeah, that title always gets me every time. I haven't found a better way to characterize it, but it means like, how useful is this food going to be to you? Once you've digested it, how's it going to serve you?
Great. Exactly. And we know that how we digest is so important, and how we choose our food and where we get our food from. So let's get into it, Mary. What are the 8 factors before you break them down, please?
Okay. Well, the 8 factors, let me back up first and say, these are things to consider when you're thinking about eating. To think, how is this meal going to serve me over time? Is it going to bring me energy? Is it going to help me lose weight? Is it going to help me sleep better? So that's what the utility of food is getting it to do what you want it to do. So the 8 factors are, one is called the Prakruti of the food, kind of the nature of the food itself. The second is, how has it been processed? The third is looking at food combining, but hopefully we won't get too deep into all those lists about food combining. The 4th factor is how much, the quantity of food we take in. The 5th factor is the habitat that the food lives in and that I live in. Number 6 is time. What time of day am I eating? What time of year? What time of life? Number 7 then gets into how I'm dining, conscious dining, those dining habits for better digestion. And the last of the 8 is your own responsibility in selecting food that you feel good about. So those are the 8 factors. And most of the time, all those food lists we come across and is always going to be related to Prakruti, the nature of the food. The other factors don't get the time and attention that I think they need, and that I think people really want, because we want to feel like we're in charge of our choices, like we've sometimes, we get served something and we don't have the choice to see, oh yeah, tomatoes aren't on my food list, or, oh, I can't eat the beans. But maybe there are ways with these other factors to make it better in terms of digestibility and usefulness.
Fantastic. Yes, breaking it down and bringing awareness to these other factors and empowering people to feel confident when making decisions about foods and meal choices.
Yeah, because that's in the end what we want to do. I'm always joking with practitioners, our job is to make ourselves obsolete.
Exactly.
Know that we want our clients to have all the power in making decisions for themselves.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate that. Like I would say, Ayurveda is a humble science, and it is really about empowering the individual so that they no longer need you.
Right. And so when we bind people to a food list, then they're always going to have to call up and say, can I make this exception, or can I make that exception, or can I do this thing differently? And although I think the food list is very important in a therapeutic setting. So the food list is based on the rasa, the virya, the vipaka of the food, its taste, its energetic, is it heating or cooling? Its vipak would be its post-digestive effect. How does it affect you after you've digested the food? The gunas could play a role in there as well. Is it hot or cold or moist or dry? And then another factor that all these fall into Prakruti. Another factor could be what they call the prabhav, the special action that the food might have. For example, reaching for that cranberry juice when you're having a urinary tract infection. And I find when working therapeutically with people, like working with food as medicine, then it's really important to pay attention to the rasa, virya, vipak, the gunas, and the prabhav. But most of us are going through our lives and we don't need our food to be our medicine so much as we need our food to be our sustenance. We need our food, in a kind of simplistic way, to be our medicine to keep us healthy, more preventative, so we don't have to go the medical route.
Exactly.
So on the one hand, I think the food lists are great when I want to practice Ayurvedic medicine with someone and help them to recover from a doshic imbalance. But the rest of the time, we might want to consider these other factors. And so I'll jump right into those if you don't mind.
Absolutely. And in fact, we covered the Prakruti, the five factors with Divya in Alter in episode number 235. So we covered that in detail, all about the taste, the gunas, the post-digestive effect. So if people want more info on that, we did a whole episode on that. Oh. But today, I know, Mary, you want to highlight the other important factors.
Yeah, and I think that's great to go back and listen to that in terms of, if I've got a vata dosha imbalance or a kapha dosha imbalance, then really being strict about what I'm taking in can be a great step towards correcting that imbalance.
Exactly.
The second factor here is processing. And so this is kind of considering what's done to the food between harvest and the time you're consuming it. And Ayurveda would consider we'd like the food to be as natural as possible. So if something had to go through several stages, I'm going to pick on high fructose corn syrup for a minute.
Pick away.
Just because, yes, and I won't go far down that rabbit hole, but it's just the idea of corn is a double glucose molecule. I guess I'm already down the rabbit hole, but it doesn't have the fructose. But in order to make high fructose corn syrup, they have to go through a series of chemical shifts, enzymatic shifts. And so they've processed it over 17 times to get to that product. And so Ayurveda would look at it and say, well, it doesn't resemble the parent. And so it's not really the body's not going to recognize it as well. So sometimes processing, like lab processing or manufacturing processing, it may make the food more shelf stable, but it doesn't make it more nutritious. And what we want to get is high nutritional value from our food and not really high shelf stability. So if I'm looking at something, people always joke, if you're shopping at a grocery store, you shop around the edges. You know, that you go through I'm thinking of my local co-op, and there's the vegetables, then there's the dairy, then there's the meat section, and then there's the bulk foods, and then there's the breads and things, and then you're on your way out.
Right.
Because everything in the middle is in a can or in a bag, and it's got a label on it. And it's gone through some degree of processing. So on the one hand, processing could be something that makes the food less nutritious, but there's the other kind of processing that actually makes the food more digestible. And that is, for example, soaking beans before you cook them.
Mm.
And even cooking is a processing product that it's, I'm not eating the beans right out of the shells on them up in the garden, although I could. But if I've chosen to dry them and then rehydrate them and cook them, that's all processing too. But it does make the food more digestible. So we're looking at the kind of processing we do in the kitchen that we don't have to use any kind of manufacturing process for, can often make food more digestible and better, make it more useful to the person that's eating it. Another kind of processing that I think of often is like lactofermentation. This again can make the food more vital. It can bring in probiotics, and it can actually make the food more digestible. So we could look at this concept of processing. Say we don't know our food list. We don't know what's going on, but I come to the table or I come into the restaurant, I'm looking at the menu. I want the things that may have been processed in the kitchen to make them more delicious and digestible, and avoid those things that were processed in a lab that move them further and further away from what my body would recognize as food.
Exactly.
The next on this list of 8 is food combining. And this one is always a tricky one for me, because if the Agni is really strong, then the food combinations are better tolerated.
Mm.
I think one of our challenges is that we just don't have super strong Agnis, and so we don't always have the ability to digest poor food combinations. Or my food combinations are bad all the time, so I continually weaken the Agni and I have less tolerance for it.
Mm.
And Ayurvedic food combining is a little bit different because it brings in some factors like not combining milk with fish, or not combining milk with fruits, or taking fruits alone. And sometimes they're confusing to the Western palate about why wouldn't I do that?
Mm.
And Ayurveda is not always great at answering the question why, but your body is.
Yes.
So you might just become the detective if you're having a digestive issue. And if you see that, I'm not supposed to combine bananas with milk, but I do that every morning in my smoothie, then you might start to think, I do kind of have some indigestion. I use a phrase a lot. My students, any students of mine listening to this will laugh when I say this, but I wonder, and would you consider, is something I might say to clients, which is, I wonder if that food combining of the bananas and the milk is creating some of the digestive issues.
Mm-hmm.
Would you consider separating that, not doing that for about 2 weeks so you can evaluate?
Very good.
It's a term I use all the time because it puts the power back in the hands of the client.
Mm-hmm.
They're free to say to me, no, I love my bananas and milk. Come with me with something else. But it plants the seed. And now they can consider when they're having that and they're having the burping contest after the smoothie, they can say, I wonder if the banana and milk are doing this. Let me try separating them. The best food combining list I've ever seen is on Banyan Botanical's site. There may be other people that have got really great lists, but I think it's pretty straightforward on theirs. I don't consider food combining to be a huge issue unless, like I said, the Agni is a little bit weak.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. The fourth of these factors is quantity. And this is a huge issue in the U.S. I know our portion sizes are all just way too big.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to consider, like the way the stomach is designed, it can handle about 3/4 of its capacity. And we want to become aware of what that capacity is or what that amount is, because if I put too much food in, I'm not going to be able to churn the food the way the stomach wants to do for digestion. Or if I put too little in, it's going to digest too quickly, and then I'm going to be eating more frequently, and the body's going to become overworked as far as digestion goes. And fortunately, the body has created a little signal that you'll receive at about 3/4 full. And that is you eat and then you pay attention, there'll be a little tiny burp that comes up. And it's not a belch, it's just this little escaping air that comes up. And that's your signal that you've reached that 3/4 full mark. Now, this is the point where Ayurveda becomes simple but not easy. It's simple for me to say, so you stop eating when you experience that first little burp. But it's not easy necessarily to stop eating at that point, because perhaps this is delicious and I want to eat more of it. Maybe I see there's still food on my plate and I don't want to waste the food. But your body's sending you a signal that says, we've kind of reached the maximum capacity for digestion for this meal. If I disregard that and I keep eating, the body says, oh, okay, I guess we need a bigger stomach. And so it begins to push on the sides of that muscle and grow the stomach. And then you have to eat more to get that 3/4 full. And then you're taking in more food than you need, than you're spending through your activities. So it becomes this, you're kind of working today to pay your future self, or to take care of your future self. Another concept I think of here with that little burp is there's a line that I heard one time and I just love it. They said, the person that stops at the first burp is a yogi, someone who's kind of in tune with and connection with their body mind. The person who stops at the second burp is a bogey. That's just like a householder. They're just kind of living their lives. They're not really thinking about it, a little bit of disconnect. And the person who doesn't stop until after the third burp becomes a rogi, which is a patient. They become one of our clients.
Right. Very good.
I just thought that was so funny because it was just that idea of, you can stop now and stay healthy, or you can keep eating. You have that choice, but it doesn't do you good.
Exactly. And it's these day-to-day habits, right, that build up over lifetime. And as you said, affects your health and wellness and your longevity.
Right. Because I can do anything once. Well, I shouldn't say anything, because I'm sure there are lots of things I shouldn't even do one time. But if my body can probably tolerate an anomaly, something outside of my routine. I'm going to a party and I eat food that I'm unfamiliar with, or I go traveling and I eat food I'm unfamiliar with. Maybe I eat too much or I eat too little. My body's going to accommodate for that. It's got a lot of fail safes in place. But if every day I'm working against what's best for my body, then I'm going to have a problem. I think another thing with this quantity, it's paying attention to what the body is wanting. So if every time I decide I'm going to eat this amount regardless of my degree of appetite, or I'm going to eat this amount regardless of the degree of work that I'm doing, that can be a problem. So with the work I'm doing, I want to back up to the appetite a minute. The appetite should be reflective of the amount of physical or mental work that I've done. But if I'm pretty sedentary, I wouldn't really have a strong appetite because I'm not needing it for metabolism. But we tend to be, we're driven by a lot of things. Appetite may be one reason why we eat food. But there's so many reasons. If you look during the day about why am I eating food right now, I think it could be boredom. It could be emotions. It could be, the food was sitting right there. I have this problem right now. I have pistachios and mangoes on my counter, and I seem to just grab a handful as I'm walking by and thinking, I really should not have these on the counter because I'm not hungry, but the pistachios look so good and it just takes a second to grab them. I think sometimes we eat because we see other people eating and that triggers a desire in us, or even just because it's our habit.
Right.
And so when we look at these quantities, about stopping for just a moment, asking, why am I eating right now? It can be a really powerful tool to determine how is this going to serve my body.
Yeah. And sometimes it's even, we're so clued into the clock. Oh, it's lunchtime and I may not be particularly hungry, but I'm going to eat.
Right. And so for people who have a lot of vata dosha imbalance, they kind of need that because they don't connect. They don't connect physically to say, oh, how am I doing? How's my body doing? Because we get so up in our heads and doing fun things that we don't stop and think, what does the body need? So I would think for vata dosha, at least for a time to bring that back in, they might need to eat by the clock like you're describing.
Exactly.
But pitta and kapha, they don't tend to need that so much. They are in touch with their bodies and they understand a little bit better what's going on with their appetite. But then that line comes up again. It's simple but not easy to say, okay, so I'm not really very active today. I'm not super hungry. I'm going to eat less. But if my habit is to have a big meal, then I'm fighting against this habitual desire for more food. And it's that concept, I think, with kids, how destructive the clean plate club is, where an adult puts food on their plate and then decides what is the volume this child needs to eat. And then the child equates this feeling of being stuffed overly full with being satiated. And so then they're always trying to reach that point of satiation. And it's not a mechanism the body uses. The mechanism of satiation, like that pushing on the sides of the stomach, is a mechanism of the body. It's like the last step for the body to say, stop eating now.
Right. Right.
So it's kind of like we can listen to the first little burp, or we can listen to that last one, or anywhere in between. And what I love about the burp is that if you come to a point where you recognize it, you will begin to see what is the volume of food you're going for, and you'll begin to put less on your plate to start with. So it becomes something that's not just, I don't have to think of it in the moment. I can begin to be proactive with it as I'm moving forward. I guess one more thing I want to say about quantity is that paying attention to the appetite. Like if a person wakes up in the morning and has no appetite, it could just be a morning. This morning is one with tea and toast. Whereas they wake up in the morning and there is strong appetite, it may be a larger breakfast. And so that level of attention, making the decision about the size of the meal based on the appetite and the history that one brings to the table.
I'm going to jump in here for a moment. Mary is doing an amazing job here breaking down this information. As always, she's such a great educator. And if you're looking for tailored support on your journey with Ayurveda, looking to really get this information tailored to what you should eat, when you should eat, your self-care practices that are best for you, how to organize your morning and evening routines that fits in with your lifestyle, well then please reach out. I offer online consultations where I really sort through all this information, because as we know, there's lots of information in Ayurveda, but I get rid of the excess and let you know exactly what you need to know, your birth constitution, your current imbalance, your Prakruti, if you have any. And then I build a strategy for you in regards your morning routines, your food, when to eat, how to eat, your evening routines, and how to build in self-care practices and mindfulness practices that fit into your lifestyle rather than overwhelming and causing more stress. If you're interested in doing an online consultation, just click on the link in the show notes or visit my website, elementshealingandwellbeing.com. If you want to discuss my online services, which are the consultations, at-home cleanses, and my educational programs, then just book the free 15-minute Services Enquiry Call, and I look forward to chatting with you soon. Okay, let's get back to my conversation with Mary.
Okay. Number 5 is a fun one too. It's about habitat. So you hear everybody talk about buying local, that we want to take in foods that are grown around us. On one hand, that's to reduce your carbon footprint, but they weren't thinking of that at the time of the Charaka Samhita writing. But it was more that when you grow up in a region or you're living in a region, you're impacted by the same external factors as the food is. So the food is going to be providing the nutrition you need to live in that environment. So the habitat the food's grown in plays a big role. If the food's grown, say, in kind of moist areas, it's going to hold more moisture and bring more moisture to the diner. If it's grown in areas that are very dry, it tends to be more drying and bring more dryness to the diner. If I'm always kind of shopping local, I'm going to be saving money because those things that are in season around me locally are going to be less expensive because they're more prolific. I'm going to be getting the nutrition I need based on the soil and seasonal effects and all the different scientific, all the chemical components of the food are designed for this region that I'm in. So when we look at, it's funny to think they were thinking shopping local that long ago when they didn't have the ability to transport food long distances. But when we look at this, it also gets into seasonal, which is our next one. But if I'm dining locally, I'm going to be dining seasonally as well.
Exactly.
Unless I have someone who's got some way to grow those hothouse tomatoes in the winter, I'm not going to have them unless they're imported. And then I can say, okay, well, the food that is local is going to better match what I need right now. And, I don't want to vilify anyone who really loves imported foods, but then you might consider what season it's taken in, because that's the next factor is time. And
Right.
I'm going to go to season first and then talk about the other times that could play a role in that. So seasonally, we are impacted by the movement of the planet around the sun, and what is the impact of or the changes in the gunas. Was some seasons are wet, some are dry, some are cold, some are warm. And so we would like our foods to be accessible during the season, and they will support us to offset the challenges of the season. Ayurveda is a nature-based medicine, believing that we should be a part of nature. We are a part of nature. It's only because we've moved into houses and cities that we've removed ourselves from a dependency on the shifts in season. There are some conditions, some disease conditions that they think is a reflection of this moving away from nature. One of them being type 2 diabetes, which is kind of rampant, that by having electric lights and by having longer days, we create what they call an eternal summer. That during the summertime, we have long days, long periods of time when we can work. We also have accessibility to all fresh fruits, vegetables, things that are a little bit higher in sugar content. So because I can eat these foods any time of the year, because I could import them, and because my lights can stay on all night long, so my day never has to end, we create this endless summer, and the body reacts to it by doing what it does in the summer, which is has a lot higher sugar intake to make sure we can stay awake during that whole day.
Right.
So when we look at seasonally, by not aligning with the seasons, we set the stage for disease manifestation in the body. Now, again, like I said with local, when I go to shop local, that saves me money because it's available locally. It doesn't have to travel very far. I might even be supporting people in my community, my local farmers. But then the addition is when it's seasonal, it's readily available. I always laugh because my husband likes to garden. And usually the gardens are going to carry the things like the tomatoes and the zucchini and the kale or bell peppers or things like that. And the time that they will be available for him seasonally to garden are the same time that they are very low cost in my store. So the gardening, although I think it's really important that we be able to raise our own food and have that relationship with food, if it's solely a financial issue, it's like this is the time of year when all those foodstuffs are really inexpensive because seasonally, all the foods are going to be producing their crop according to the season. And now I go into this concept of importing food. Now, some places you live, their growing season is so short, you really have to import food. So when we look at these 8 factors, that's another beautiful thing about this list is it's just one of 8. So if my food, say, is lightly processed, I'm combining it well, I'm taking an appropriate quantity, then I can maybe get some pass on if it's been imported or if I'm having it a little bit out of season. So if I've got, like I'm up in Northern California, there's not a lot of avocado growers here, but this is the season for avocado. So I may not be local, but it's going to be seasonal. Or I might have things that are local and not seasonal as well. So we have local, seasonal, and fresh. Those are going to be 3 main factors in looking at the factors for how well the food is going to be utilized and how easily it is to digest. The other things are like looking at time of day or time of life. You think how differently I'm going to go time of life first, but you think how differently you ate when you were a child. I think of the foods that your mother or grandmother might have given you during the time when you were a child, or your father or grandfather. When you're a child, you are building tissue so quickly that you can tolerate some of these heavier foods, or the foods kids really like. It's going to be heavier, denser, usually sweeter, but they've got this strong metabolism that is building tissue so they can tolerate that. Then we hit adulthood and there's a shift that occurs. Our desires for different foods change. But if we continue to eat the foods we ate in childhood, we're going to end up more kapha dosha. We're going to have more kapha dosha imbalance because where it might have been appropriate during childhood, it's no longer appropriate.
Right.
And then same thing as we age, we go into older years. Now we have to be aware that, something I was able to eat when I was younger now gives me digestive upset. So there's that shift of saying, as we go through the different times of life, we have different nutritional needs and we have different tolerances to foods and different volumes of food that we can actually digest at a time. If I don't change, then I've got a problem. I remember hearing a statistic that a menopausal woman her caloric demand drops 500 calories a day. Prior to menopause, she could eat 2,000 calories a day. After menopause, it's 1,500.
Wow, I never heard that stat.
Isn't that scary?
Yeah, that's a lot.
It's one of the reasons why menopausal women have such a hard time maintaining their weight. They've lost one of the metabolic factors in the estrogen, but also if they're eating the way they ate just 5 years before, they're getting an extra 500 calories, which would equate to about a pound a week that would be added on.
Wow.
And it's stunning because then they have to increase all the exercise and everything, and we're not aware of it. We don't feel any different.
Right.
It just is the way the body is processing. And the third time then is time of day. And so thinking about what is the volume of food I might need in the morning, or what types of food might help me prepare for the day. If you think of the breakfast, some people say, it's the most important meal of the day. But that doesn't mean it's going to be the largest. It means it's important because it sets the stage for how is your day going to run. If it's too heavy, suppresses the agni, your motivation drops. Maybe you go through the day kind of meh. Or if it's light and sharp, maybe it sparks the mind and you go through the day very alert and awake. So we can think about the foods we're eating in relationship to how do I want my day to go. If I'm feeling very anxious, then something heavier and more grounding may be more beneficial. If I'm feeling kind of lethargic, maybe it's a cup of sharp tea and something spicy and hot to kind of break through my lethargy. If I'm already feeling overheated, I might start the day kind of cooling the mind down to start with. So we look at time of day to say, when I take the food, I think of it like putting gas in the gas tank. How far is this food going to take me? How long can this trip be? And, considering what kind of road conditions are up ahead, what's going to come up with my day, so I can be a little bit more proactive with my food. So what I take in at breakfast breaks the fast, yes. And it's important because it will set the stage for how the day is going to run. But it wouldn't necessarily be the largest meal because my agni's not strong yet. And then in the middle of the day, I've got that big, strong agni. So this is a great time to have the main meal of the day and to have a meal that's going to have carbs, proteins, fats, vitamins, minerals, water, all those nutrients coming in. And then maybe I'll find at 3 o'clock or so, as energy begins to flag, that I can do something that's going to, pick me up again. And then in the evening, before the sun goes down, capping the day off, really just with a small meal to kind of pay back anything I need, top that tank off again in case it needs any additional energy for the evening. But here in the U.S., of course, we've tipped that so crazily that we'll have 3 big meals every day without a concern for the degree of appetite or the demand for the work that I have coming up. And so this way it brings consciousness to the table, which is so important to bring intention to what I'm doing, especially when it comes to self-care.
Right, exactly. And then the timing of our last meal as well, because I'm here in Europe and the tendency is to eat very late.
Right. But is the tendency when you eat late, is it a smaller meal or is it a big meal like we have here with our dinners?
Normally it's a big meal. It's a dinner.
Wow.
So here in France, normally restaurants wouldn't open until 7:30, but and people wouldn't get home from work until that time. So it's
right.
a late, bigger meal. And in, Spanish culture, it's even later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I've heard this about Europe, and I don't know if that also skews to later bedtimes.
Yes, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
It would be later bedtime as well.
Mm-hmm. And then also a lot of cultures that dine late have later bedtimes, and then they also have some time during the day where there is like the siesta might be in the South American cultures, or sometime when there's a downtime in the afternoon that kind of reflects that, maybe they're splitting the day up a little bit differently.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't have siesta here, but yes, certainly in Spain, they would have siesta and downtime in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm. I found it in India, although I didn't find that they ate really late, but they also, like, the shops were all closed 12 to 4. I don't know if that happens in different places in Europe. It seems like it's more of a...
Oh, in France, lunch is a very serious affair and the stores will close down for a couple of hours. Yeah. And businesses will shut as well. They really respect the meal times, which is great to see.
That's really wonderful. And I wonder if by doing that, it skews it so it makes it more digestible, it makes it for better digestibility of the food, more usefulness of the food when you do give due diligence to the food itself and take the time that the food requires.
Yeah, that's certainly something in in Spain, Italy, France, that there is a lot of attention given to mealtime. Mm-hmm. And, there's a focus on food and a gathering of the family together and, not generally eating in front of the TV.
Yeah, and this segues so beautifully into point number 7, which is conscious dining. Considering how we're eating is important. So again, when we look at 8 factors, this is what I love about the 8 factors, is it frees me to make choices and decisions that may not meet my Ayurvedic rule book, saying, looking at these 8 factors, maybe the timing of the food is not optimal, but I'm doing really conscious dining. I'm eating foods that are local, maybe that I've prepared fresh in my kitchen as opposed to having them processed beforehand. And I'm taking the right quantity. So I could look at these factors as, 5 out of 8, 6 out of 8, right, as opposed to having to just meet the one criteria. Now, you probably have done podcasts before about the Ayurvedic conscious dining habits, taking food prepared with loving hands, eating till you're 3/4 full. We talked about avoiding iced drinks with foods or things like that about how to eat.
Yes, we have covered that, but I always think it's good to review.
Yeah, I won't go into all the 15 points, but it's really just mindfulness. It's like what you were describing, it sounds like in the European dining. And I remember that from a very short time that I was in France was, they expected you to be in the restaurant for 2 hours.
Yes.
And it was expected that it was going to be a leisurely and you would pay attention to the food and the food was well presented. So there was beautiful colors and it was quiet, a dining atmosphere, except for that table of loud Americans in the back. Everything else was quiet. And it really struck me how they brought that conscious dining into every mealtime.
Yes, and it's true. Take a long time over our meals. Nobody's rushing you out of the restaurant. You'll be there for 2-3 hours.
Yes. And that's remarkable. I had the experience in Paris. I saw a McDonald's and it had 300 seats in it. And I said, and I didn't understand. I said, you get that many people? They go, well, they're going to be here for an hour and a half or so. Whereas in the US, it's just like in and out. So you would never need anything so big.
Yeah, yeah, it's such a different way of thinking about food. You wouldn't really see people eating on the street here, that you will sit
Right.
and eat. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And then, so this conscious dining is a wonderful way to really nurture and nourish the body, because when you take that first bite of something, see, you brought all your attention to this meal and you take a bite of it and it doesn't taste good or doesn't feel good, you're not going to eat the whole thing. You're going to have that awareness in the first bite. But with distracted dining, we could be 2/3 into something before we're thinking, I wonder if this
Yeah.
was really the best choice.
Right. Exactly.
And so there's a statement I hear oftentimes where they say like a Big Mac, I don't know why I'm picking on McDonald's today, but a Big Mac eaten with perfect consciousness would be better for you than a bowl of brown rice eaten distractedly. And I would always add to that, because with full consciousness, I would spit out the first bite of the Big Mac, because I would say, this just doesn't taste like food. I'd rather have some, if I'm going to eat and pay attention to my food, I want to like it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's a part of this consciousness that brings us the degree of self-awareness and the degree of a capability to make a decision about the quality of the food.
Absolutely.
And the last of our 8 is self-responsibility, that ultimately you decide what you're going to put into your mouth. You decide what you're going to eat, how much you're going to eat, what time you're going to eat. You have the control over all of these factors. So then we get into that idea of, do I want to generate health with this meal, or do I just not care right now? And I have to confess that sometimes I just don't care right now. That if I'm at a party, or I'm thinking of like the state fair here that has horrible, horrible food, but it may be that during that time, that's a part of the experience, and I'm going to eat something that I wouldn't eat all the time. So some of the time I might make a choice because it's my responsibility to myself. And I say, no, I'm going to do this for the fun of it, whatever that fun is. And then the self-responsibility is later that I don't do that every day. It's something that's going to be at that event or at that party or whatever. And it's not going to carry into my daily habit. Because I think sometimes I get asked this a lot about Ayurveda having so many rules, that people will say, it's got so many rules. How are you supposed to go through life like that? And when a student put that question to me, I was really stumped for a little bit. And I came back the next day and I said, it's not Ayurveda that has the rules. It's your body that has the rules. And we can either pay attention to those or we can ignore them. Right. And Ayurveda just kind of brings them to the forefront and says, don't put ice in your drink, but it's your body that doesn't want the ice in the drink. Or if I tend to have a smaller meal when I don't have much appetite, that's my body's rule. And it's not an Ayurvedic rule. So we think of this with self-responsibility. I can think, is this going to harm me? And I can make a choice.
Exactly.
If it's not going to harm me, can I minimize any negative impact that it does have? I worked with someone one time who wanted to write a book called Cheating with Ayurveda, where you would be able to, you can have the ice cream as long as you have it with a cup of ginger tea. Which I always thought was funny, but it's that idea of we are responsible for ourselves. We're responsible for all of our choices, and we want those to be the best choices we can make, at the same time recognizing that we are walking in the world and we have the sensory drive as well. So we have to just kind of have that level of self-responsibility to make those choices for the state of our health, and to recognize when we're moving away from health that we have the tools in our hands to bring ourselves back into balance.
Yeah, that's such an important point, Mary, is that this taking responsibility. And I think for so long with healthcare, the Western healthcare, it's taken out of our hands. Whereas now we understand through Ayurveda that it's our day-to-day decisions that have an impact on our health and well-being. And they're, relatively logical decisions to make. And it's really about just tuning inwards and again, empowering yourself to make these decisions so that you can enjoy life and be vital and be full of energy.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so with these 8 factors, bringing it all back around to this, now when you sit down, you can look and think, is the food fresh? Is it local? Is it seasonal? And just try to meet as many of those high points as possible to know that the food's going to be really useful for you, nutritious, nourishing, and digestible.
Beautiful. Absolutely. And I think the easiest way, and you mentioned it earlier, and I know I mention it all the time, the easiest way to find out what's local and seasonal and that's fresh is go to your local farmer's market. Or if you don't have a local farmer's market, connect with a local farmer.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And even though I hate to plug the internet, you'll find if you do local foods, type in your region, or seasonally available foods, type in your region, you're going to get so much information. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's so great.
Talk to people first.
Yes, exactly. And to support these farmers, because, it's a hard job they're doing and they're providing such a service for us, and it's grueling work year round. So the more that we can support them and also making that connection, it's on so many levels. It's lovely to connect with your community. I know, when I go to the farmer's market, I'm connecting with others in the community. And oftentimes, when I'm working from home or I've had a busy week with work, it's one of the few times during the week I'm actually out there in the community. So it's very important socially and for your health as well.
Feeds you on all levels.
Yes. Well, Mary, this was really wonderful and such great advice. And I think broken down in such a way that it makes it very easy for people to understand. And also to understand that, you have some flexibility here, but your choices will affect how you feel.
Yes.
And not only physically, right, but mentally also.
Well, there's a whole new topic too. Food for the mind and emotions. Yes.
Yeah.
If you're not feeling well, if you're feeling depressed or anything, you want that food light. You want it kind of stimulating because it's going to break through that darkness.
Absolutely. And as you said earlier, you want food that your body recognizes, not like this high fructose corn syrup, which is being processed, what should you say, 18 times or something?
I think I read 17 enzymatic changes away from its original stuff.
Yeah, your body doesn't even know what to do with that. And so the poor liver is trying to work hard to get rid of it. Yeah. So thanks again. Great advice. And I love the conscious dining as well. And that's what it all comes down to, is being conscious and having that awareness.
That's it. Have the awareness and care. Just care enough about how you're going to feel to make a good choice.
Yeah. And I think for some people as well, if you want to talk a little bit about this, Mary, is, a lot of people, busy lives today, and they're like, but I don't get time to cook. And so then sometimes it is this processed meal. What would your advice be there?
Well, first it's looking at what's the highest quality processed meal that I could get. So maybe it's finding someplace that's going to have salads and soups that were freshly made, as opposed to choosing some packaged product that was made 6 months ago in a factory. Looking around at your local, again, going to local community involvement is look at local not food kitchens necessarily, but local stores or places that are preparing food fresh daily and finding out what it is they serve and what's going to really serve you.
That's a great point. And often supermarkets now have hot food available and some good choices as well.
Yeah. And I am a big fan of the Instant Pot. I'm a big fan of slow cookers, pressure cookers, having some of those things that will speed up the time that you need in order to prepare.
Absolutely. And oftentimes it is just planning in advance. And, maybe before you go do your weekly grocery shopping, that you're sitting down and planning. And then at the same time, planning what days are quiet that I can do some cooking and so on.
Yeah. And then you can't see there's the self-responsibility angle again. We become a victim of our schedule as opposed to the master of the schedule.
Yes.
And so it's like, I don't have the time. And it's like, Oh, but what time do you have? I had a student one time that she wanted to make herself oatmeal for breakfast every morning, but she couldn't do both making the oatmeal and her meditation practice that she wanted to do. So she decided that she would meditate over the oatmeal, and so take it as she would put the mantra into the oatmeal and things. And I thought it was just kind of an ingenious way to multitask.
Yeah. And then the food is ever more sattvic then.
Yes. I thought it was great. I did my oatmeal meditation this morning, and it's like, well, there you go.
That's
finding
it.
ways that you can work.
Exactly. There's always ways around it, but it's knowing that this is your food choices should be a priority in life.
Yeah. Because they're going to help you through every possible thing that's going to come up for you during the day.
Absolutely. Like we said, physically, mentally, how you show up in the day depends largely on what you eat, when you eat, and how you eat.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Mary, thank you so much. Insightful as always. And just could tell you're a lifelong educator. Really laid it out very clearly for us. And so, Mary, before we finish up, is there anything else you'd like to share, or where people can find out more about you or your resources?
Well, I have a website. We have a website called Mary Thompson Ayurveda, and I'm kind of stepping towards retirement, so they'll find lots of things on there under the docs and stuff and resources that they might want to grab. They can read whatever I've written. I haven't done a whole bunch of blogs, but that's pretty much where they'll find me.
Great.
There.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today.
Oh, thank you, Colette. It's always a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Okay, come back and visit us again.
Okay, I will.
Take care, Mary. Bye for now. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Mary, and please check out the show notes for Mary's website. And on her website, you'll find a blog and a great infographic on this very subject. It's called Ditch the Food List. These 8 factors are better. And if you think that this episode will be helpful to family or friends, please share it with them who can spread this wonderful wisdom of Ayurveda. If you haven't already subscribed to the podcast or follow the podcast, please do so. And if you would like to rate and review it, I would really appreciate that. Please come and follow me also on my social media on Instagram and Facebook under Elements Healing and Wellbeing. Thank you very much for tuning in. I truly appreciate your support. And until next time, take good care of yourself, be well, and bye for now. Slán go fóill.